Convicted child sex abuser Ghislaine Maxwell is not the victim here. The real victims, the survivors, are people like Jane. Now, we don't know Jane's full name, but we know that Jane was 14 years old when she met Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell at a youth camp in Michigan. Here's what the story said, quote, Epstein first abused Jane when she was 14. Jane said that there were sexual encounters with Epstein for the next 3 years, around every 2 weeks. Sometimes Maxwell was in the room during this sexual abuse. There were occasions when Maxwell touched Jane's breasts. Jane is a real survivor. So is Carolyn, who testified that she went to Epstein's home over 100 times from age 14 to 18, where she was told to massage Jeffrey Epstein. Carolyn said that at the age of 14, before one of the massages, Maxwell came in and felt my boobs and my hips and my buttocks and said that I had a great body for Mr. Epstein and his friends. And then there's Maria Farmer. Unlike some of Epstein's other victims, Maria Farmer was 25 years old when she says Epstein assaulted her, though her younger sister, who also says she was abused by Epstein, was a minor. Maria Farmer was an employee of Jeffrey Epstein's at the time. She said that in 1996, she was at the estate of Victoria's Secret CEO Leslie Wexner with Epstein and Maxwell. She says that Epstein and Maxwell violently groped her until she fled the room and barricaded herself in another part of the building. And during her time in Epstein's orbit, Maria Farmer says she also encountered Donald Trump. She told the New York Times that in 1995, quote, late one night, Mr. Epstein unexpectedly called her to his offices in a luxury building in Manhattan. She arrived in running shorts. Mr. Trump then arrived wearing a business suit and started to hover over her. Ms. Farmer said she recalled feeling scared as Mr. Trump stared at her bare legs. Then Mr. Epstein entered the room, and she recalled him saying to Mr. Trump, no, she's not here for you. The two men left the room, and Ms. Farmer said she could hear Mr. Trump commenting that he thought Ms. Farmer was 16 years old. Joining me now is Maria Farmer, along with her attorney, Jennifer Freeman. And before we get started, I just want to say to you, Maria, I think it is incredibly courageous that you are continuing to tell your story in a very, very public way. It cannot be easy, and I'm very grateful for you being here with us tonight. So let me start just there, Maria.
Thank you, Jen, for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Let me start by asking you, I mean, this nightmare has followed you for a very, very long time, I mean, decades. And I'm sure that Jeffrey Epstein's reemergence, I mean, all over the news has been incredibly painful. How are you? How are you doing?
Yes.
How are you digesting all of this?
Thank you for asking that. That's very thoughtful, because a lot of people aren't aware of every time his picture is on one of their podcasts or, and I've asked several people, can you please not just flash his picture everywhere, or Maxwell's, and not glamorize them? But thank you for asking that, because a lot of people aren't aware that re-traumatizes victims every time we have to see his face. And it's a case that has just never gone away. It just won't go away. And I need your audience to understand that, I reported this almost 3 decades ago. So a lot of people will say, oh, why is she just coming forward now? And they think it's political. And it's not. It's something I've been working on. Pretty much I dedicated all of my youth to this. And so I'm doing it not just for me, but for the victims who are now deceased and the victims that are very much alive. And I want to get justice for all of them. I feel that for my little sister to have gone through what she went through and to have had to testify against Maxwell and then have to suffer, and there are others that I love very much who are suffering this right now about Maxwell, it's completely unacceptable. Why would Maxwell be given a voice when she is a convicted pedophile? It's been very difficult, and I appreciate the question. I appreciate you asking.
Of course, and I think we're all grateful for you having the courage to be here and tell your story and be out there. And let me ask you, because this is one of the reasons I think it's so important to hear from people like you who are so courageous. I mean, you and your sister, as you just referenced, Annie, were the first survivors to come forward and try to tell the authorities about what Epstein and his associates were doing. You first went to the NYPD in 1996, then the FBI. You said you felt like you weren't taken seriously.
Right.
You've repeated that.
I was dismissed.
You were now suing the federal government, accusing it of negligence and failing to protect victims of sexual assault. And I just wanted our viewers to be aware of all of that and all the time you've spent on this and trying to get this story told. Tell us more about the story you told to the police
Well, when I called, I told them I was reporting kind of an international pedophile, and I called it child pornography ring because they didn't call it CSAM yet. But that part is one of the most important parts to me, because some photographs that were personal photographs of mine that I used for working from, not to copy exactly, but they were anatomy studies for my art. And I was doing these series of paintings for the movie As Good as It Gets. This wasn't for me, it wasn't for Epstein, it was actually for a major producer. And because of being, held captive, I didn't get to finish that. But basically, those photographs are a permanent thing that Ghislaine Maxwell stole from the basement at Leslie Wexner's guest house. And those photographs are a permanent way that my sisters are being abused and that I'm being abused. And so when I told the federal government, I said, this really frightens me, because I believe if they did this to us, they're doing it to everyone. And I see a lot of children coming in, allegedly for Victoria's Secret modeling or for modeling for Katie Ford. They had all these model scouts around them, Trump, all these people, and they were allegedly auditioning models. But for Victoria's Secret, the girls didn't have any breasts. I didn't understand. And so basically, it's been very an arduous journey over 29 years of just trying to get people to hear me. So I'm so grateful that you're bringing attention to this evening.
No, and we want you to be able to tell all the aspects of your story that it's so important for people to understand. And it wasn't you didn't only go to the FBI and the police back in the 90s. You also had an interview with agents in 2006. And one of our legal correspondents, Lisa Rubin, was able to obtain the FBI's notes from that interview. I'm going to showing some of them right there on the screen. There are a ton of redactions in these notes, as you can see. And I know this was some time ago, but do you remember what you spoke to them about during this interview and what details you shared with them during this interview?
Yes. Yeah, so basically, I want to make it really clear, because people don't understand this. My little sister was only 16, and she didn't go to the FBI in '96. I did that. And I protected my family because I didn't want anyone to know how dangerous this was. And so basically, after 1996, they literally just hung up, and I heard nothing for 10 years. And then I got a knock on the door. I was in the woods of North Carolina, and there were these two agents standing there. And Agent Nesbitt Kirkendall said, we're here about your 1996 FBI report. And I was kind of shocked, and it's because I have so much trauma. I was kind of making jokes and trying to give them orange juice and cookies and, just make light of it. And it's so traumatic. Like, my sister was selling products to them. We didn't know what to do with the FBI. We told them the entire story of what occurred with Ghislaine Maxwell being a sexual predator and predating children. She used to say, I need to go get the nubiles at 3 o'clock because the children were getting out of school. And of course, I would ask to quit. And I said, what is this? And she said, no. They're just models for Victoria's Secret, Maria. Just calm down. So basically, there was a lot of gaslighting that occurred. But in 2006, they hunted me down. And they asked me to testify in the federal trial in Florida. And then they gave the sweetheart deal. And so I never testified. And then when it came time to testify in this trial, I actually was in ICU in chemotherapy. And a lot of people say, she didn't even get to testify. And I'm like, because I was incapacitated. But my sister did testify, and my mother. And our stories have never changed. They're very credible.
I did not realize that.
I just want my files.
Of course you do. And I didn't realize about your health journey, too. You've been through a tremendous amount. You've also talked about a night in 1995 when you were at Jeffrey Epstein's office and Donald Trump came by and made a lewd comment, and then you overheard Epstein say to him, she's not for you. And we just told this story because you've told it publicly before.
Right.
And in response to that, and I want to ask you about that, but I just wanted to note that in response to that, a White House spokesperson responded saying, this is recycled old fake news of the highest order that was already peddled more than 6 years concocted by Democrats and the liberal media, just like they did with the Russiagate scandal, which was just proven today. The president was never in his office. The fact is that the president kicked him out of his club for being a creep. There is a lot packed in there, similar themes we've seen in other statements, I will say, but it's about you. What is your response to that?
Right. So, first of all, that's so insulting and disingenuous because I reported this in 1996. And I have to say, like, Donald Trump was a Democrat when I reported him. So him saying that this was a Republican thing, this is not a partisan thing. This is pedophilia. Anyone can be a pedophile. It's literally, unfortunately, it just happens to be a lot of Republicans. And that's a fact. And those same Republicans want to entertain Ghislaine Maxwell, like Tim Burchett wants to entertain her and flash her around and act like we victims should not be heard from. He didn't want to speak to me. He wanted to speak to Ghislaine and give her a voice in an audience. And my little sister is one of her victims, and so am I. So this is so damaging. And yes, I'm fighting 2 cancers, so I would like to be able to retire and have my FBI reports so that I can help bring accountability to everyone. It's not just me. I have the weight of all the young women on my shoulders right now.
You certainly do, and I am, again, grateful for you being here. We have to sneak in a very quick break.
Jen.
I have more questions for you. Okay. I hope you don't mind sticking around.
Okay.
Both you and Jennifer,
Not
thank
at
you so
all.
much. We'll be right back. You heard Jeffrey Epstein say to Donald Trump, she's not for you. What was your reaction to that? What was going on in your head at the time about that? What did you think that meant?
Right. Well, I already felt kind of intimidated because it was in a dark office and I was alone with my new boss, to be, and this man that's a powerful businessman. And so I felt intimidated, but that's not why I reported him. I reported him because when Epstein came out of the office, I was making a face at him because I felt threatened. And so I went, and he kind of laughed and backed off. And as that was happening, Epstein walked out and said, oh, no, she's not here for you. And he emphasized, she's not here for you. And he said, come with me. And he escorted him into another office. And I was like, who's in there? And when he said, oh, I thought she was 16, I thought, is there a 16-year-old in there? Right? So what people need to understand is I'm not some crazy person who just reports people if they look at my legs or I'm in an office with them. But when someone is hanging out with a convicted or a pedophile, and I discover that that pedophile has stolen my little sister, and then there's a powerful businessman that's making comments about me being my sister's age, then I think that the FBI needs to take a good look at it. And so that's why I asked that they do that. And as far as like the Republicans have really been kind of tormenting the victims. And so that's a separate topic. But
I want to ask you about that, too. And the part that just kept sticking with me is she's not for you. I just don't know what that meant. None of us know what that meant, but it is hard to get it out of your head. Let me ask you, Ghislaine Maxwell, and I want to ask you, too, about this, Jennifer, and thank you so much for being here with us. Todd Blanche, who is now the Deputy Attorney General, is meeting with Maxwell in jail today. And as you have referenced a couple of times here, so I just want to ask you more about it. She's been a little, and I started talking about this, lionized almost, like lifted up by some who are suggesting she could be a victim too, what is your reaction to that? What has been your reaction to that? Maria, let me ask you that. And then I wanted to ask you, Jennifer, just what your thoughts are on that meeting.
Right. So I've never met a more predatory, terrifying human being in my entire life. And neither had Virginia Giuffre, and neither has Annie or Anushka or many girls like Shantae Davies. There's hundreds of us that were preyed upon by Ghislaine Maxwell. She's a very dangerous person, and she threatened my life on many occasions. I've had to move and be in hiding because of this predatory child predator and just victim predator. So it's completely unacceptable for anyone to call her a victim. The woman is not a victim. She's a victimizer.
Let me ask you, that is an accurate and good way of putting it. Let me ask you, Jennifer, you've obviously been standing side by side here with Maria, but you are also a lawyer. And I want to know your thoughts about seeing Trump's former personal lawyer, who's now the Deputy Attorney General, go spend the day privately with Ghislaine Maxwell. He's going back tomorrow. What do you think about that?
This is deeply, deeply disturbing. Ghislaine Maxwell is not a reliable witness. To think that someone who is facing what she's facing the rest of her 20-year sentence and now might have an opportunity to change that dramatically by saying whatever she wants to say or needs to say to those in charge and in charge of her fate, it makes no sense, and she's not reliable. I find it also very disturbing to equate her with the victim. She is. We've been dealing with the Epstein victims for many years, Maria and many others, and they're the people that should be focused on here. And there's absolutely no attention to the victims. For example, there was the issuance of this memorandum 2 weeks ago. That was issued without talking to a single victim.
Are you referring to the request for the grand jury files? That or a different request?
No, sorry. I'll make that. Yeah, no, the FBI and DOJ memorandum that says we will not release any files. There's nothing to see here. We're not going to charge anyone. This is over. And they made this conclusion, reached this conclusion without even talking to a single victim.
Which is completely outrageous. Let me ask you on that front. I mean, because there's also been this call to release the files from the grand jury, which are very narrow, and you can describe it further. But one of the steps they're supposed to take is reach out as a part of the victim notices process. Have they done that at all? Have you heard from them, Jennifer?
Not a peep, nothing. So they have not done their job in really, truly trying to get those records. But this is really, those records are, even if they got them, are a spit in the ocean. They have 300 gigabytes of data and physical evidence sitting in their offices. The grand jury materials could be somewhat interesting, but that's not the guts of it.
No, certainly not. Let me ask you, Maria, there's been some I don't know if it's progress, some push to subpoena the Epstein files, to learn more, that's moved through the House Oversight Committee yesterday. Do you see that as progress? Right. And if Congress asked you to testify publicly or behind closed doors, is that something you'd be willing to do?
I've been waiting to testify. David Boies had promised I would be able to testify, and it didn't happen. And now it looks like they're wanting Ghislaine to testify. It's my turn. Yes.
So you would be willing. Well, that's a significant thing. And
yes, absolutely. I'm waiting.
I hope somebody out there is watching and ask you.
Me too.
Let me ask you both. Jennifer, let me start with you. If you're able to gain access to the Epstein files, you may, I guess, if Congress has them and if they've contacted you. First of all, let me ask, has Congress contacted you about sharing anything from what they've subpoenaed?
No, they have not.
Okay, I hope they do. Let me ask you then, if you were to gain access. I hope so, too. Somebody watching better be contacting you. Let me ask you, if you were to gain access, and I certainly hope you do, if they follow through with this, and I think they will, what are you going to look for first?
Well, first, we're going to look for Maria's records, which we've been asking for years.
Yes.
And in response, we got, for example, a recent memo that's from the government that says, we'll be back to you by November 2027. That is completely unacceptable. Jen, the reality of this is that this is one of the largest law enforcement failures in U.S. history. Maria went to the FBI, gave them all the information they needed, talked about child sex abuse, trafficking, child porn, gave them the information. If they had done their job, nearly 25 years of sex abuse and other crimes could have been avoided. And this is truly tragic
29.
And unacceptable that they failed to do their job.
You have both been so generous with your time. I just want to ask Maria, before you go, you've been so courageous to speak out publicly. And if you could speak right now to any of the other victims who say they have been assaulted by Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell, what would you say to them? Because I know a lot of people are struggling right now.
Right. Well, there's a few of them I'm going to be reaching out to, and I want them to know that I love them. I'm so proud of people like Jennifer Rose and Shantae Davies and Marika and just Anushka. They're the most beautiful young girls that were harmed. And I'm much older. I'm the den mother, and I'm mad. I'm the angry, bear. And I want those girls protected.
I'm sure they're grateful to have a den mother like you out there speaking
so
bravely on their behalf.
The old one.
Maria Farmer, Jennifer Freeman, thank you both so much for being out here and sharing your story.
Thank you, Jen.
Teresa Helm joins us. She's now working as a survivor services coordinator for the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. Teresa, thank you so much for being willing to speak out and to share your story and your thoughts in this moment. What have the past couple of weeks been like for you with all of this renewed focus on the Epstein case?
Good morning, Anna. Thank you for having me. It's been yet another whirlwind, I'd say, of emotion. And really the main focus is trying to stay calm, stay grounded, because that's what us survivors continuously have to do throughout the ongoing process, because the re-traumatization is a very real item, whether it's the most recent days and what's going on, or whether it's been throughout the years of all the memes and all the news stories that come out. It's a constant, okay? So the last few weeks or bit of time here, what it means is that we have to stay focused on what the outcome is for these survivors. There needs to be the transparency, because there are women here, many women, that have gone through these lived experiences that is something that cannot be taken away or simply shut down. It cannot be shut down. These are experiences that have been had, and you don't have this experience after experience with so many different women and go on to say that there's actually nothing here because there have been multiple people to support this perpetual abuse and exploitation for decades.
Wow. I imagine it's really quite painful to have that re-traumatization that you talk about, especially given all of the constant in-your-face discussion about Jeffrey Epstein and his crimes and his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. I'm curious, has anyone from the DOJ reached out to you either before or after releasing that memo, essentially saying case closed?
No, I have not personally spoken with anyone regarding this matter. I'm not sure what's speaking to me to tell me I would have to oppose their view. Again, I cannot stress enough the fact that there are so many people that have, again, I'm just repeating myself, perpetuated decades of exploitation. My personal experience, I know of 3 different women that led me down the path to me taking myself to the home of Jeffrey Epstein, where he assaulted me. I know of an additional 4th woman who followed up with an email thanking me for my time there, if you could believe that, which is a part of the normalization of the abuse. So just in my experience, I have 4 women, Jeffrey Epstein who assaulted me, and I have an additional gentleman, the chef that I met in Jeffrey's home. I have the driver. I have the place that I stayed, which was Jeffrey Epstein's brother's apartment building. You have all the accomplices there. So these are just the people that help facilitate. What about all the people that these other women were exploited and trafficked to? There are so many people involved, and there have been so many people involved for decades. So it cannot, there's zero sense to be made to say that there's actually nothing here.
You have Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche now meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell 2 days in a row. You were a key witness at her trial. You testified that she groomed you for Epstein. What are your thoughts about her getting these high-profile meetings and being put back in the spotlight?
I'm hugely concerned about these discussions with Ghislaine Maxwell and what they may result. I first and foremost would adamantly state that her credibility is zero. She has previously been charged with perjury, so we already know that she's capable and willing and ready to lie under oath. So why would we grant her the opportunity to yet again raise her right hand, declare the truth and nothing but the truth, when the credibility, it's just not there? How can we listen to her? If she has so many important facts to state, if she has so many new items to share about individuals, why are they new? Why did she not share them long ago? When I try to make sense of anything that is going on right now, the only conclusion that I continue to come to is none of this makes sense. And when things don't make sense, they don't add up. I do believe because there is a significant lack of truth, and the transparency, that's entirely gone at this point.
Do you worry that Maxwell will be given some kind of leniency, maybe even a pardon? What would that mean to you?
I am concerned about that, and it would mean the complete crumbling of this justice system that should first and foremost stand for, fight for, and protect survivors. We all deserve a pathway to justice, and then we don't deserve to have it yet again robbed from us because so much has already been taken. It truly does seem, I should say, just an upside down world where you are promised and there are declarations of the judicial system working to support pathways to justice, and for them just to simply crumble is what it appears is happening right now.
Well, you're hearing a lot of people speak out, though, to say, release the files, more transparency, which I know is what you're asking for. And we're learning little by little more pieces of the puzzle. The Wall Street Journal has been reporting about this book apparently created for Epstein's birthday in 2003 that reportedly includes letters from President Trump and former President Clinton, among dozens of others. President Trump denies he wrote anything, and a spokesperson for Clinton referred NBC back to a 2019 statement saying Clinton had no knowledge of the crimes. There was another attorney who represents hundreds of survivors who told MSNBC that his clients remember this book and that some were actually pulled into putting that book together. Do you know anything about that book?
I do not know anything about that book, no. So their experience, clearly was different than mine. I saw framed photos of Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein with presidents in their homes. I did not have anything to do with that book, no.
So the president has continued to call the controversy around this investigation a Democrat con job and a hoax. A few months ago, another Epstein survivor, Virginia Giuffre, she took her own life. Another has died of an overdose. What's it like for you and the hundreds of other survivors to see this kind of messaging from the President of the United States?
I can't imagine anything to be a hoax. Well, that's what I mean. Simply put, it's not a hoax of what women have gone through. So I'm not clear as to what the hoax part would entail. The lived experience of these women is very real. They've lived it for decades. And, obviously exceedingly tragically, that I think a lot of these experiences was just in the end too much, for some survivors, which is something that happens fairly regularly with survivors. Certainly not all, but there is so much tragedy ongoing that can happen. Nothing here is a hoax. There are real lives that have been impacted. And I would like to believe that while we shouldn't get caught up in any kind of political weaponization of anything on anywhere, that is not the point. The point are the women that deserve their continued path to justice, which means holding those into account that have harmed them.
To that point, how do you want to see this end?
I would like to see that there are people that are going to be criminally held to account for their crimes. I would like to see people that potentially are still running. Are they running parts of the government? Are they running businesses? What are they doing right now? They have to be held to account, because these are not the type of people that we should have continuing, educating our youth and influencing children. We need to have people that are non-criminal, non-exploitation, or people that aren't committing exploitation. I do believe personally that our future society is really dependent on who we allow to get away with what. We can't continue this message of power and influence and money will keep you from being held into account, or even gives you the sense of superiority that you can and should treat others like this as if they're not up to your level because of your power status. These things need to be viewed, looked at, and really just taken to the ground, back down, and level out the field of justice. Because as of now, I feel like we're severely out of balance.
Joining us now, Jennifer Freeman, attorney for Maria Farmer, who you just saw in that clip, and Gretchen Carlson, journalist and co-founder of Lift Our Voices.
Jennifer, I was on earlier today on Morning Joe, and I listened in real time as the tape played back of the president just refusing to say, oh, no, I would not pardon, grant clemency, do anything for Ghislaine Maxwell. And understanding what she was convicted of, knowing what so many just valiant women have come out and said about the role that she played, what she did. Why do you think that the president declined to be definitive today on what he would not do?
I can't speak for President Trump. I really can't, and I can't speculate how he thinks either. That would be very difficult. But what I can say is this is the notion of pardoning Maxwell is a betrayal to the victims. It's outrageous, and it's utterly disheartening for them. These girls, these young girls and young women who went through this, and one of my clients, Annie Farmer, Maria Farmer's sister, testified at Maxwell's trial, one of the 4 people that testified. And the notion that her testimony will be thrown out the window is just disgraceful.
Gretchen, good to see you again.
And I want to say something.
Oh, sorry, go ahead,
Sorry.
Jennifer.
Yeah, I just also wanted to bring us back to where we really should be starting and looking at this whole issue, which is the utter failure by law enforcement, one of the largest failures in U.S. history, the FBI's failure to listen to Maria Farmer when she came forward in 1996 and did what every good American citizen is supposed to do: go to the FBI, go to law enforcement, tell them when you see a crime is being committed, and more crimes are coming. When she talked about crimes against children, and the FBI, what did they do? They did absolutely nothing, which is why we're looking towards a civil remedy, which is why Maria has to move forward with a lawsuit. But that's really where the focus should be, is the failure of the U.S. government.
Gretchen, meanwhile, you feel that there has been some movement in the last 10 years or so, probably stemming from the Me Too movement, into how we look at at predators, how we look at abusers and assaulters. Tell me a little bit more about this. You wrote about this extensively today.
Yes, I wrote an op-ed, and I take this opportunity to say to these survivors, as I like to call them, not victims, but survivors, that we are lifting them up tonight. I don't want them to feel erased. I want them to understand that there's an army of people behind them. We would not have the Epstein story in the news like we do right now had it not been for the courage and the bravery of all of these survivors to come forward initially. And they are still remembered tonight. This is massive progress, and here's why. We are not demanding to hear from these survivors in order to believe that something bad actually happened to them. And before I came forward and before the Me Too movement, we would have been demanding that. Just as Jennifer just said, they would not have been believed. And so we are honoring them tonight as the reason that we are still talking about this story, and that why the majority of Americans want to find out who these perpetrators are and hold them accountable instead of looking at the survivors and saying that they did something wrong.
Well, Jennifer, I take Gretchen's point. I think culturally there is some honoring of these survivors. I am concerned, though, that that does not extend to the Department of Justice. When they made their original pronouncement that there was nothing to see here, they weren't going to release any files, it seems as though they did not follow the standards and protocol as laid out in the Victims' Rights Act. What would it have looked like for them to have done this in a way that actually honored survivors?
What they should, I appreciate the question. What they should have done is they should have actually looked at the evidence carefully, looked at all the evidence, and come forward with some kind of explanation of what happened and release the files. That would have been appropriate. But to simply close the door, shut the door, bolt it, and throw it in the ocean and say there's nothing to see here, that's really unacceptable.
We have a letter from Epstein survivor attorney to Blanche, James Comer, and Schumer that offered to help with the Maxwell interviews. And I want to just read from it. While the federal government undoubtedly has skilled and experienced investigators, there's no one that possesses as great or greater depth of knowledge regarding Epstein-related matters than the combined level of knowledge that the undersigned have accumulated. Recognizing the value that our knowledge can have in achieving the objective of full disclosure, which many, including the hundreds of Epstein victims we represent, are calling for, we are willing to volunteer our services to assist in the Maxwell interviews. Jennifer, I am still struggling to understand, and our NBC News colleagues are out to the Justice Department to ask them about the particular nature of the interviews, and I'm using quotes, that the Department of Justice conducted with Ghislaine Maxwell, because we don't know if they are recorded. We don't know if she was under oath. And now we also know that Congress is looking to speak with her. What do you think about all these additional conversations? And do you agree with the letter that it should be folks like yourself who are talking to Ghislaine Maxwell, or is it even necessary at this point?
I do believe the victims should continue to be given a voice. And that could include talking about Ghislaine Maxwell, talking with Ghislaine Maxwell, talking to the prosecutors who are looking at this. Because what didn't shock me today is the limited immunity grant. In order for the prosecutors, in order for Todd Blanche to sit down with Ghislaine Maxwell and for her to be willing to do it, she was made what's called Queen for a Day, which you give them limited immunity. It's limited, meaning you can't use what they say against her in the future. There are some exceptions to that and ways to get around it, impeachment, whatever. But that was pretty likely to be happening. So, you know, the damage was already done once he did that. But certainly the victims should play a role, a very important role. And they shouldn't be shunted aside, especially someone like Maria Farmer, who brought this to their attention in 1996. And if they'd only listened to her, more than 1,000 victims wouldn't have been abused. And nearly 25 years of abuse wouldn't have happened.
Well, Gretchen, to that point about timeline, this was from a recent government filing, which talks about the fact that from 1994, so that is 2 years before that 1996 accusation, to 2004, petitioner Maxwell coordinated, facilitated, and contributed to the multimillionaire financier Jeffrey Epstein's sexual abuse of numerous young women and underage girls. The abuse followed a pattern. Petitioner and Epstein would identify vulnerable girls living under difficult circumstances, isolate them from their friends and families, gaining their trust by giving them gifts and pretending to be their friends, normalize the discussion of sexual topics and sexual touching with the girls, and then transition to sexual abuse, often through the pretext of a girl giving Epstein a massage. Is there a way to talk about this and hold people accountable without re-traumatizing these survivors?
Yeah, first of all, just let me say that Ghislaine Maxwell is not a victim. She is not to be believed, more than likely. She lied in the 2016 civil suit. She lied under oath in the 2021 criminal suit. Pardoning her would be a complete slap in the face to any survivor in this country and across the world. And there would be an insurrection, not just from the left, but also from the MAGA base that's trying to get answers from all of this. So to me, this is a sideshow. I wouldn't put much credence in this today. The only thing that the Trump team is looking for is the idea that she might let him off the hook, number one, or some high-ranking Democrat that they can come out and say, see, this is exactly what was really going on here. I just like to bring it back to the idea that we need to lift up the survivors. We would not be talking about this story if it was not for them. To Jennifer's point that law enforcement didn't believe them at the beginning or listening to it, I totally agree with that. But we have to see where we are today in 2025, and we wouldn't be here without the courage and bravery of the survivors speaking up.
Including you, Gretchen. Thank you.
4 weeks, the Trump administration has tried to distract from the severity of the Jeffrey Epstein files, drowning out the voices of the survivors. Teresa Helm, who says she was sexually assaulted by Epstein in 2002, recently told NBC News how all of the discussion of Epstein adds to all of their anguish, writing in an email, quote, "When a person's abusers are repeatedly flashed in view at any given moment, and especially when promises of justice and promises of structures of power finally being held to account, to then essentially have the door shut in your face and no longer open for business, then what?" Teresa Helm joins us now. She's a survivor services coordinator for the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. Teresa, one, thank you for being here. And most importantly, thank you for your continued work with survivors. And we know how important that work is, especially now. I kind of want to start right there. You also told NBC News that trauma is never one and done. Can you talk about what it is like watching, us, watching members of Congress, watching the president talking about this over and over and over again, and, on the Republican side and with Donald Trump kind of acting as if this isn't a big deal?
Well, good morning. First, thank you for having me. It's good to see you too. I feel that it's a lot. I think, to sum it up, there is so much controversy. There's so much residual and ongoing heartache from not only my experience, but the experiences of so many women that have been harmed by these people. So, to be honest, it seems like a spectacle ongoing, whether it's one side or the other. Everyone is up in arms about it, and as they should be. However, I do often wonder if what we're up in arms about is really focused on what it should be. And justice is absolutely imminent in this situation. Holding those to account for the crimes that they've committed is extremely important. And so then we're left with this, it seems, this looming question of how do we get there? Because it's not as clear and concise of a pathway forward to justice as even it was made out to be previously, which adds to the ongoing disappointment. I do say the re-traumatization of the events that have happened in the past, the ongoing rise and fall, even, is how it feels. Is it induces a lot of trauma that we fight every day to heal and grow from. And when we come up against these seemingly walls that we just can't seem to scale, then it creates a heaviness. And I also would like to say that within that heaviness, though, there continues to be this fire. I can say for myself for sure, there's a fire within us, I would say, in survivors, which is how a person gets through something so terrible and continues on, because there's a tremendous amount of hope and a tremendous amount of fire within us that we're able to keep burning and carry on. So there's a huge amount of disappointment lately, confusion. That's what I keep coming back to, is a lot of confusion on what's actually happening.
Teresa, at the beginning of the show, I played a soundbite from Maria Farmer, as you know, another Epstein survivor. And she said in the clip that we showed, she's never met a more predatory human being in her entire life than Ghislaine Maxwell. One, do you agree with that characterization? And two, how does it make you feel to know that the number 2 person in the Justice Department just spent 2 days alone with her, talking to her about the case, and now all the talk is about, well, what's going to come of it? Could a pardon come from those conversations?
I can say my experience with Ghislaine Maxwell. So what's interesting about what Maria has stated about her, I agree with that. And here is why. My time with her, with Ghislaine, she didn't come out of, I didn't go to her beautiful home in New York City and meet her. And she did not present herself as evil and as a monster and as someone that's going to put my life or my well-being in harm's way. She came at me with politeness, with openness, with friendliness, with making emotional connections with me, with the ability then to build this trust with me within hours. So her presence and her approach to me was so meticulously calculated that her intention behind all of this, I would even say, beautiful humanitarian woman-to-woman interaction, it was all to fool me. It was all to get me to think one thing and believe that I was in as I said, a safe and healthy environment, when actually she was setting me up to then go into tragedy. So I don't know anybody that can be an inherently good person that can do something like that. It is a significant and severe disconnect from humanity. And so now when I'm contemplating and learning and listening about potential deals being stricken or released from prison, what comes to mind a few times already is, are we actually going to have another sweetheart deal here in the state of Florida, where she is, given some reduced type sentence? I don't feel good about it at all, because I do take into consideration, and I feel like everyone should, the fact that she has been charged with perjury. She's already risen her right hand and sworn under oath that she would tell the truth and nothing but the truth, and she sat there and lied. So I am not certain how I'm not certain how this is all going to pan out. I do know that the emotions are high and the questions are running rampant in my mind of what it might look like if something like that were to proceed and she were to get released from prison. What then? What should we all think and feel then? How concerned? I would be very concerned. For my safety even, I would be concerned.
Teresa, you know, the conversation in Washington, D.C. and around the country right now is about whether or not the file should be released. What we know and what you know is that within that file is, I think, at least 1,000 survivors' information, descriptions, possible pictures and videos in that file. Do you believe, and I don't think anyone's opinion matters more than one of you, one of the survivors, on whether or not these files should be released. Do you think these files should be released?
I think that what they say they're going to do, it should be done. I believe that there are, and again, I cannot speak for other survivors necessarily in this matter. I can speak for myself. And while my experience is different, you know, there aren't people, you know, that I was trafficked to, and I do understand that some women have had that experience. Ghislaine Maxwell and the women that helped them get me to Jeffrey's home that night is who I've had my experience with. And so there's clearly people there. There's multiple people in that instance, and that's just my one-time experience. There are so many women that had so much more experience, unfortunately, with them. So if they feel it's important to have these names, I stand by them. Of course, I feel that there are people that should be held to account. We can't continue to protect and provide salvation for these predators that have harmed so many and then continue to do their daily job and go home every evening. The justice in that is severely and significantly out of balance. And I think that we need to take it back to the fundamental human dignity comes first, and it should.
Teresa Helm, thank you for coming to The Weekend, but more importantly, thank you, to reiterate what Eugene said, thank you for speaking up and for your work on behalf of sexual abuse survivors. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Sigrid McCauley was Virginia Giuffre's lawyer, and she joins me now. It's great to have you in the program. I really appreciate you joining us. First, I just want to ask you the same question that my colleague Hallie Jackson asked the family, which was just your reaction to hearing that exchange in Air Force One with the president when he talks about Epstein stealing people. He doesn't like when they steal, and then someone asking specifically about Ms. Giuffre and him saying, "Oh yeah, I think it was her." How did that strike you?
I think it was really jarring. I mean, you saw the family and how upsetting that can be. The loss of Virginia is very real. It's very recent. And she was a champion for these survivors. She was somebody who went up against pure evil, Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, and took them down. And it took her years to do that. So I think sort of the flippant nature of that comment, you know, wasn't well received, as you can imagine, because everybody's just so raw right now, missing her and, you know, wishing that that had never happened.
What kind of toll did it take on your client to wage this battle for as long as she did? I was sort of looking back through research in preparation for this interview. And it was just striking, like, how much civil litigation there was. And then there was a criminal case about Ghislaine Maxwell. I mean, just basically constant for years.
Her strength was truly tremendous. I mean, it's remarkable the courage she had. She started with her initial case against Ghislaine Maxwell, that her courage, her strength, her work resulted in Epstein being put in prison, Jean-Luc Brunel being put in prison, Maxwell being put in prison. And of course, she was supported by a chorus of other survivors who were fighting for that same justice. But it really is tremendous. We had the settlement for a class of survivors just this past year against 2 financial institutions with significant remuneration. The fact that she was brave enough to stand up and say, this has to stop, this should never have happened, but I'm not going to stop working until we put them in prison. And that's exactly what she did.
And now, of course, we're watching in slow motion the lawyer for Ghislaine Maxwell essentially, without saying it, ask for a pardon. The number 2 at the Department of Justice, including the man who was the president's former criminal lawyer, interviewing her for 2 consecutive days. The president saying he hadn't thought about a pardon, which is things he said before about other people he's given pardons to. What does the specter of a possible presidential pardon for this woman mean for you?
it would really be in our history the most significant travesty of justice. I mean, this is a known sex offender of young children, and the president would be allowing her some form of reduced sentence, or even worse, letting her out. I mean, it just simply cannot happen. The American public has to rise up and do what's right and say, we will not allow this. She is pure evil. She hurt many, many young lives. I mean, the 4 young, brave souls who gave testimony during that criminal trial were just a fraction of the hundreds and hundreds of young girls that she victimized. Those were just the minors, but there were girls just a few days shy of 18 who she similarly ruined lives. So this is somebody who perpetrated crimes for many, many years. She should not see outside the walls of that prison.
There's a lot of talk about, transparency, the release of the files, a lot of back and forth, I think, understandably about, what that would mean, who might be hurt by it, whether the survivors themselves, most crucially, would have their privacy protected, would other people totally incidental to the crimes at issue would have their reputation tarnished. How do you think your client, Virginia Giuffre, saw that? I have a sense from her family, and how do you see it?
Well, she's been fighting for that for many years. In her original case against Ghislaine Maxwell, we just got an appeal back from the Second Circuit most recently. We've been fighting for years and years to try to uncover the information that was sealed in that case. We contend wrongfully sealed. So that battle has continued, and she was ferocious in that fight because she did want the public to know. She wanted that information disclosed. Similarly, there's a wealth of information that the government is sitting on right now that could be disclosed that tells the tale of how this atrocious sex trafficking operation existed for so long and how so many people were involved. And that has been kept under wraps. So her mission was really to disclose all of that. And we continue that work in her honor.
I believe Hallie asked the family this. I want to ask you this, too, and I'm asking this purely as a factual question. Did Virginia Giuffre ever talk about Donald Trump at all in the years that you knew her and talking about her experiences either at Mar-a-Lago or with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell?
Only in reference to, her work at Mar-a-Lago. He was not a central figure in her story, certainly. And she has talked very openly about what happened to her and who was around during that time. And certainly that's what she really wants exposed, or all the bad actors who were around, who turned a blind eye to what was happening. And I think that's why it's so critically important that the government continues the work in trying to uncover the information that is being held in different jurisdictions, whether it's through the grand jury, whether it's through the general investigation files that the FBI and DOJ has, whether it's through the various civil cases, to really disclose what happened here, who was involved, whether money was being exchanged and to whom. All of those things need to be disclosed so that the public can know what actually happened here.
As someone who a large part of your career has been focused on this story and your representations of Ms. Giuffre, what has it been like to watch this story come roaring back to life in some ways and seem to be headed possibly towards, the possibility of clemency or a pardon for one of the only 2 people ever been convicted?
Well, certainly, I've lived this journey with Virginia and other survivors for over 10 years now. And, the accomplishments that those women together made by putting these individuals in prison were so significant and really, honored their suffering in many ways. So to have this new dialogue about the government giving Ghislaine Maxwell some kind of microphone to talk is incredibly upsetting to the survivors. Of course, this is a woman who lied under oath repeatedly, over and over and over again in the deposition I took of her. Yet the government's going to credit her statements. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, the real information that needs to come out is in the documents. So I'm hopeful that the government will take a step back and look at that and think about that more clearly and do the right thing.
Final question for you. We've obviously seen a number of high-profile stories over the last decade or so about women who were victims of sexual abuse, sexual trafficking, sexual assault, and a real sort of intense cultural conversation about how survivors are treated, how they're treated by the legal system, by the media, by society, whether they're believed. And I wonder whether you think we've made progress in the decade that you've been following this, given where we are now, or whether it feels to you like less has been made than maybe we think.
It's a really great question and a very fair question. I mean, I will tell you, when I first started representing Virginia in 2015, the press, the government, everyone, nobody believed survivors. They were not to be believed. And it really took that shift in the 2017 timeframe where, very famous women who had been assaulted were coming forward and speaking their truth. And unfortunately, what we're seeing now is a walking back of some of that progress. It's really disheartening. Survivors need to be believed. They need to be heard. They're not lying about what happened to them. They're speaking their truth. So as a society, we have to do a much better job at listening and a much better job at crediting their accounts.